What's cooking? What's cooking these days? Well, we're going to be talking with our next guest. Mike Morrice is joining me next, and we're going to talk about what is cooking. Yeah, stay tuned. Hello, and thanks for tuning in to PWD Allies podcast. My name is Brent Frain. I'm the host. Brought to you from Victoria, British Columbia. And it's a gloomy day. It's a little bit breezy, not too bad. Nice fall day. What's happening in your end, Neil? Welcome. Neil,
It's
my editor.
gloomy out here too.
Yeah, it's kind of a gloomy day. And also joining me today is Mike Morrice from Kitchener, Ontario. How is the weather out in your area, Mike, and how are you?
Well, over here on the Haldeman Tract in Ontario, we got a good amount of snow over here. It's pretty chilly,
Oh,
and it might be a bit different than what you folks are experiencing in BC, but there's lots to enjoy about the winter also. So that's
You
the
know what
way I
I,
like
you
to
know
think
what,
about it.
yeah,
yeah.
you know what I love, Mike, is that I've gone back through, as a producer, I'm always going back through some of the old videos and I keep track of how many times different guests have been on. And
Oh boy.
I checked because I was pretty sure I'm thinking to myself, like, I think Mike always comes on around Christmas time all the time.
Yeah.
And it's
Yep.
true. It's but like in back when
Mm,
Was on Twitter Spaces, you were
Yeah.
always around. Like
mm.
it was near Christmas time, you would come
Mhm.
on, and it's been every year. So 2022, 2023, 2024, and now this year, you
Mhm.
always come around again around December-ish,
Yeah,
and so it's
Wow.
great. Yeah,
it's a
Thank
nice it's like a nice present to have you join
that's right.
Mike.
well,
Yeah,
thanks for keeping this holiday tradition going then. It's
yeah.
good to be
Well,
back with you both.
yeah.
It's lovely to have you on, Mike, again, as usual. And just for our listeners and our viewers, Mike Morris is joining me from Kitchener, Ontario. Mike was the MLA or MP, sorry, not MLA, MP for his region. Always great to have for the Green Federal Green Party. But Mike, what's cooking? What's cooking in your area? What's
You
happening?
have news. You
You
have
have
Wow.
news.
news.
So there's a lot happening, including I'd love to talk about the number of people I'm hearing from in our community who are getting denied their DTC applications.
Mm.
We got to be talking about the reality of all the barriers. And I know you want to talk about the disability benefit.
Hmm.
We got to talk about how difficult it is to even get access to applying for the disability benefit. But I think you wanted to start on a positive note. And so, yeah, last week it was shared by Elizabeth, the leader of the Green Party, that I have been appointed as a deputy leader with the Green Party.
Oh
Yeah.
wow!
And yeah,
Congratulations.
thank you. For me, it just gives another platform to
Hmm.
get onto more podcasts like this one
Yes.
to talk about the realities facing folks in my community, but in communities across the country, about rates of poverty, for example, about
Hmm.
disability injustice. But you know what? Not everybody's experiencing these times the same, right? We
Hmm.
got
Hmm.
There are 65 billionaires in this country who actually continue to increase their wealth.
Hmm.
Yeah.
This can be a new platform for me to continue talking about how we need to, make sure we tax those billionaires sufficiently to not give the government excuses to not properly fund the disability benefit, for example.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Um, and so, yeah, this is just the last week or so that was shared. We had a little holiday party, another tradition for the holidays here in Kitchener, and Elizabeth was in town for that. And so she shared that news just a week ago or
Oh.
so. And I'm really looking forward to the increased responsibility. Of course, I think I shared the last time I was on the show that I will be running again whenever the next election's called.
Right.
So we
Right.
shared that back in September.
Hmm.
And in the meantime, this is just another way to continue to engage in the issues I really care about.
So
Hmm.
what are the duties of the deputy minister? Like
Yeah.
what do you
It's
do?
It's mostly like a secondary spokesperson for the party.
Right.
I
Okay.
already was like there is a shadow cabinet for the Green Party, and I
Hmm.
retained my two critic portfolios of housing and disability inclusion,
Mhm.
and so those continue. But there are two deputy leaders across the whole country,
Oh,
and so being one of those two will open up more. As an example, a few weeks ago when the budget came out, you both might have seen. That I was in Ottawa for Budget Day,
Right.
joined Elizabeth for the analysis and then in sharing back reflections with the media. Some of that was, knowing that this would be coming up, wanted to, just continue to be, a key spokesperson for the party on the issues affecting folks in communities across the country, and particularly on the areas that I've been really focused on affordability, particularly around housing, around poverty, particularly around folks with disabilities, on everything from grocery store prices, and of course, including the climate crisis
Right.
at a time when the federal government is focusing their time, energy, and money on building new fossil fuel infrastructure on top of the 30 billion we already give these foreign-owned fossil fuel giants. I think the three of
mhm.
us might have some other ideas on where we could better spend that kind of money to invest
Yeah.
in communities and
Mo-
not in handouts to profitable oil and gas companies.
I'm
Hmm.
glad that you mentioned about the federal budget.
Hmm.
When the federal budget came out just recently, um, yeah, there was no mention about the Canada Disability Benefit, about getting people out of legislative poverty, because the federal government promised. I mean, years ago now. I mean, and still the carrot trick of, oh, there's more to do. It's always that spin-off, right, of the federal government all talk but no action. I mean, yeah, like you mentioned, Mike. I mean, it's so easy to tax the multi-billionaires. I mean, they wouldn't even feel that. I mean, the amount of
Right.
interest that they're getting pays for that benefit, and yeah,
I,
like it's
I,
insane that
I
they
believe I
out.
believe the last time you were on was
Yeah.
right at the end of June of this year,
Yeah.
and so that was just before the CDB went live.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you know, Mike, but since the rollout of the CDB, I do not qualify for it, and
Mm.
neither does Brent.
Mhm.
Now, to be clear on my situation, like I actually have the DTC. Like I've
Mm.
had one for since I was, I've been disabled my whole life, but I used to have a doctor that said, well, Neil, you're not disabled enough, right? And I was born with cerebral palsy, but I used to have a doctor that says, oh,
Mhm.
you're not disabled enough. You don't get the DTC, right? And then
Wow.
when I got married to my first wife, who was also in a wheelchair, when I was doing my taxes that year, the first year of marriage, she says like, "Why aren't you applying for the DTC?" And I said, "Well, my doctor says I don't qualify for it." And she started laughing, and that was when I was about 35 or so at the time. And she says, well, "Just go to my doctor and you'll get approved." So ever since been about 35, I've had the DTC. But anyway, so I have the DTC,
Yeah.
but I don't qualify for it because of household income.
Yeah.
So
Right.
the household income disqualifies me. So it's not tied to individual; it's tied to household income, and that's what disqualifies me. So I'm on provincial assistance here in BC. I have the DTC, and yet the household income disqualifies
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, that's the same thing that goes for myself is household income disqualifies me automatically. And again, that's another reason to remove that barrier, to get rid of the DTC as a requirement to access the Canada Disability Benefit. And like you mentioned before, Mike, maybe we can talk a little bit, just a few minutes about that. It's removing that requirement to the DTC to get the Canada Disability Benefit, because I know that you had advocated really hard on that part and got an agreement from the federal government that that would not be a requirement. But then, of course, they decided to sidestep that situation.
Well, to this day, it still doesn't make sense to me, and
Yeah.
I hope some lawyers, will look at this over
Mhm.
time
Mm-hmm.
It's Section 11F of the legislation of the Canada Disability Benefit Act that I was successful in getting an amendment to. We got 5 amendments in total. One of them, though, was to 11F. And it says that the regulations are meant to ensure an application process that is barrier-free.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I've yet to get an explanation from the government on how requiring somebody to go through a 16-page application process, 15 pages of which need to be filled out by a doctor for
Yeah.
the disability tax credit. And then once you get the DTC, to then have the additional application process for the disability benefit.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
those are 2 different applications.
Yeah.
How that follows Section 11F of the legislation, it's still beyond me. If I
Yeah.
were an MP today, that's one of the types of questions I would be asking the government side, as they continue to perpetuate this. And I should also, Brent, truthfully, there
Yeah.
was mention of the disability benefit in the budget. Of course, nothing about fixing the core issues that the
Right.
three of
Yeah.
us and others have spoken about, and the disability community called out long before the benefit was realized. Issues like, as Neil, you share about household income.
Hmm.
So many other federal benefits don't look at household income, they look at individual income only. But of
Mm-hmm.
course, when it comes to the disability community, all of a sudden, oh, we are not going to give you the dignity of looking at your financial situation. We're going to make you dependent on other people.
Right.
Right.
They haven't fixed, of course, the amount. They haven't fixed the application process, etc. One thing they did announce this year that's a bit odd to me is they've announced $150 for successful applicants of the disability tax credit,
Oh
meant to
yes.
offset the costs of going through that process.
Oh boy.
What doesn't make sense to me about it is in the previous year's budget, they announced a larger amount of money to
Hmm.
support anybody to complete the DTC application process.
Oh.
Mm.
So I pulled out the numbers. It was 243 million they promised in budget 2024, to cover the cost of medical forms and completing the DTC over 6 years.
Hmm.
So
Mhm.
that's like, I think that's 80 million, no, sorry, 40 million a year,
Mhm.
for those costs.
Yeah.
In the new budget, now it's down to only 115 million over 4 years.
Oh.
So, you know,
Even worse.
28 some odd or so. So a lower amount per year. Um, but now that is only for those who are successful.
Mm-hmm.
But they haven't said anything about whether the prior announcement no longer exists.
Yeah. When
Yeah.
you say it was for 6 years, and then for the
And now it's
next year
down to
you're
four.
downing it.
But
Yeah.
they get to
Longer and down.
announce something
Yeah.
new and make it look like
Yeah.
they've done something additional in this year's budget,
Yeah.
Hmm.
without saying anything about whether that previous commitment that was actually larger, that
Yeah.
covered hopefully more people, that money has never rolled out. And that feels disingenuous because I remember when Budget 2024 came out, one of the things I said that was great about it is I always try to not just criticize, but celebrate some of the small wins. That was a small win. Um, and we don't have any clarity on that. So there were a few kind of tweaks around the edges of the disability benefit in
Mhm.
this year's budget, but nothing that actually centered the core concerns from the disability community, including limitations around household income, for example.
Mhm.
But that's also why I think it's so important what you both are doing. Is that it needs to, like the advocacy is always stronger when it comes from the lived experiences of folks with disabilities in this country.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mhm.
so I think it's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. There's always, that more to do, from the federal government, and then they spin it off to, historic, basically a benefit, and up to $200, and but what they're not saying is it's $200 per household.
Yeah, and the
Yeah,
words up to are doing a lot of work there
yeah,
too.
great.
Um, so it seems to be a perception that the Canada Disability Benefit is the maximum amount,
Yeah.
when in fact we need to make sure that folks know when they fill out the form, depending on their household income,
Hmm.
they may qualify for a whole lot less.
Yeah.
which is nowhere near what they promised, of course, we've spoken about so often.
That splash,
Um,
you know.
It's just
that's it.
crazy to me that, again, like, to take my example and to take Brent's example, like I jumped 2 hurdles. Like I said, I am on provincial assistance, so that's hurdle number one.
Yep.
Yep.
So that I cleared hurdle number one. I cleared hurdle number two because I have the DTC, and I get to hurdle number three, which is household income, and it's like, sorry, don't qualify. So
It's
it's
almost like they're looking for any number of different ways to disqualify you to spend as
yeah,
little as possible on
yeah,
following through on some fraction of a much larger commitment
yeah,
they made. It's pretty
Mhm.
clear that that's the case, right?
yeah.
When they came out with the amount that's only $1 billion a year total, it's clear they needed to create all kinds of barriers and limitations,
Mhm.
given the reality of the size of the poverty, the disproportionate rates of poverty amongst the disability community across the country.
Mhm.
And they never should have, promised that this would be hundreds of thousands of working age Canadians lifted out of poverty. It's clear that that's not at all what was realized.
Mhm.
And that's why this advocacy has to continue, whether they have a minister responsible for folks with disabilities or not.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And there's, I mean, so much time that they've put into it, and there's no results coming forward. And I mean, I guess we'll talk about Alberta, what they're doing. I mean, they're clawing it back. They're expecting
Yeah.
their recipients to actually apply for it. They don't have a choice. You have to apply for it, so we can now take off that up to $200 off their income. Yeah, so that's crazy.
Yeah.
What's your view on that? Like, I mean, what our take on what's going on there?
Well, I'm not as familiar with Alberta specifically, but these provincial clawbacks is what we
Hmm.
were fighting against. One of the requirements that is in the legislation is the agreements between provinces, territories, and the federal government are required to be made public, which isn't
Hmm.
always the case. And on that vote, I remember it, the government side, the Liberals on committee voted against that amendment,
Mm.
but others supported it, and it passed on a vote of 6-5. The intention behind the agreement from folks in the disability community that I'd heard from was that that transparency might limit the clawbacks because, of course, in the federal legislation, the federal government can't bind provincial governments to do anything.
Right.
Mhm.
But the hope was that they could bind them in these agreements.
Hmm.
So let's see those agreements afterwards. And if that isn't in there, well, that's obviously the shortcoming. So if that's the case, Brent, in Alberta,
Hmm.
it is in the legislation that that agreement is required to be made public. And
Okay.
I would question, why is it that it wasn't negotiated between Alberta and the federal government to
Right.
prevent that kind of clawback from happening, which was the threat made in leaked memos from the Ontario government, but didn't manifest here. So
Oh.
to me, this is what's important about having conversations like this one 6 months after the benefit being initiated is
Mhm.
now we can reflect on the rollout and continue to hold them to account on issues like clawbacks that the disability community was talking about years and years before the benefit came
Yeah.
Yeah.
out. This is not a surprise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But obviously, we need more accountability from the federal government to protect against that, but
Hmm.
also to talk about. I'd be curious both of your experiences. I'm hearing from organizations and people here in Waterloo Region about how long it's taking to get DTC, so the disability tax credit applications through. Of
Mhm.
course, there's an uptick in people applying now that it's the qualifier to the disability benefit.
Yeah.
But I'm hearing people tell me that they applied in July and they're not even hearing back on the DTC until late October.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually hearing the same thing. Some people say that they were approved, and then they found out that they weren't approved, denied, accepted, denied, like back and forth. And it really puts a lot of emotional strain, on the person. I mean, mentally and physical, because I mean, when I say physical too, because I mean, when you have a lot of mental strain of something that's promised, and you think that you're being approved for something, and then they say no, you're actually now denied based on household income or other extraordinary circumstances. One of my neighbors was saying the same thing, that she applied, and then they assessed it, and they said, oh well, your household income's making too much money, and it put a lot of emotional distress strain on her. And then she said that, which then affected her physically, because she started having physical symptoms related to it. I said, well, because undue stress, and it will affect you physically. And I mean, again, she says, I mean, what did I do wrong? I'm just a disabled citizen of Canada, and sure, I live in BC, but what did you do wrong? And I said, you haven't done anything wrong. It's the federal government that has done something wrong, and they can't figure out how to fix the Canada Disability Benefit. And she goes, well, then why did they promise it in the first place? Right. I know, and of course,
You know
yeah.
what I found interesting, Mike, is that when they sent the letter, I got a letter in the mail, and it says it. I think it actually even had it in bold and underlined. It says according to your application, it says you are eligible. It says you
Mhm,
do meet the eligibility
mhm,
requirements. So you're thinking, yay, but then it
yeah,
says, unfortunately, you've been disqualified because of household income.
yeah.
So it says yes and no in the same letter.
No,
It's
that's what I mean. That's what I mean.
yeah.
And so, I mean, and it
Yeah.
really can really
So you
mess with.
are eligible, but you got disqualified. Sorry.
Yeah, like, wow.
Well,
Yeah.
and Neil, I appreciate you mentioning also the privilege you have to be able to navigate all these applications as well.
Hmm.
Because what I'm also hearing from folks in our community is the number of people who don't have a social worker or other supports to even help to navigate all of this. It
Hmm.
goes back to my disappointment that Section 11F was meant to protect against this, was meant to be barrier free. That was what I'd introduced and we got support for. And so it's not only the delays in the processing I'm hearing about, and it sounds like the language of the letter that is kind of putting somebody on an emotional roller coaster
Yeah.
when they read
Hmm.
that letter, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But even to get to the point of getting the letter,
Yeah.
um, and of course, not knowing which doctors would even be willing to do the DTC to start with without having this funding actually flowing to make it more appealing for them to do so.
Hmm.
But I just worry about the number of people in my community who actually are eligible, um, but there are so many barriers to work through and not having enough supports available. There's a nonprofit in my community now who's looking to look at the grant funding in that to bring on a social worker so that they can better support people just to get the benefits they're actually entitled to. And
Hmm.
all of this, truthfully, Brent, I think the language you said earlier was that they couldn't do it. Of
Yeah.
course they can.
Yeah.
It's a choice. It's a deliberate choice in how the benefit was designed. And it was a budgetary decision that, like I said before, if you're a foreign-owned fossil fuel company, oh, we got the red carpet for you.
Oh yeah.
You got tens of billions for you. But if you're a person living in poverty with a disability in this country,
Hmm.
then we're really capped out. We really gotta
Yeah.
uh, overpromise and underdeliver. And while, of course, what we did see realized was as a result of the advocacy of the disability community, it just is a reminder of how much work still has to be done, right?
Hmm.
I do think it's unfortunate because I honestly do think that Carla Qualtrough, when she took the file on, I honestly believe that she believed that it was going to happen the
Yeah.
proper way, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Hmm.
I really do believe that she thought that this is going to be rolled out, it's going to be rolled out correctly. And then for whatever, however reason, it just all went sideways. And
It
it's
just
just, it's
crumbled.
just
Yeah.
too bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you're kind, Neil, but I think it was an indication when somebody like Minister Qualtrough was then shuffled out of cabinet and
Yeah.
out of that really important position, with all of the good intentions she had to lead towards a realization of the promise that was made. Um, Again, those are choices that at the time Prime Minister Trudeau made and that Prime Minister Carney is continuing with.
Hmm.
Um, and those are, you know, I really disappointing, particularly now, even to go so far as to not even have a cabinet position at
Right.
all. And we spoke about
Yeah.
this last time. Then, when Elizabeth asked a question about the disability benefit, the minister responsible, who has a much larger portfolio, couldn't even get the right words for the benefit. I think she called it a credit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wasn't it there were I watched this one and wasn't it the Minister of Sports or something, Sports and Recreation or something like that that stood up and
Yeah, I
answered?
think
Yeah.
it was employment services, and
Okay.
it's
I
just in
think I
it.
saw once it was somebody it was like
But that's also the case. When I was
yeah.
in Parliament, I would bring it up as there's a chance for MPs to follow up on questions asked in question period.
Mhm.
And you'd get kind of a junior minister responding.
Oh.
And depending who's available that night, it wouldn't always be the junior
Yeah.
minister for serving folks with disabilities, as you're alluding to, Neil. I'd get the junior minister for sport or the
Oh
junior
my.
minister for environment, which I always felt was a kind of a lazy move on their part, not even
Mhm.
to ensure that the right person for that portfolio, even at least the junior minister, was available to speak about it. And that person would be handed a script and they'd read the script that somebody else wrote. And
Mhm.
I don't begrudge the junior minister. I
Mhm.
begrudge the governing party for not appropriately providing that means of accountability to Canadians
Mhm.
through an elected MP. Um, and again, that's gotten worse because there is actually no minister responsible now. It's tucked into a larger portfolio and, indicative then of the priority that we're seeing. And like I said before, the importance of keeping the pressure on. And
Yeah.
for folks like myself, for folks who seek to be an ally, that we need to recognize how much work still needs to be done for and alongside and with our neighbors with disabilities who continue to deserve better.
Mhm.
And so we can't, those who have the privilege to choose to think about this or not,
Mhm.
a person living with a disability um, in poverty right now doesn't get to choose whether this is going to affect them or not. But for someone like myself, I think it's an important choice we need to continue to make to stay in this fight um, until the benefit is realized and until the voices of folks with disabilities are appropriately heard in the federal government.
Yeah. My,
But you're
I,
right though. Like sorry, Brent.
sorry.
Uh I remember like you said there was one time the Minister of Environment stood up, the federal Minister of Environment stood up
Yeah.
and answered. I'm thinking to myself like, what
Wow.
does environment have to do with disability? And it's
Mm.
profoundly insulting actually
Mm.
to have a minister that's standing up and has nothing to do with anything about disability. And just goes to show you how little care and thought and whatever word you want to use goes into like let's let's be serious about disability, and they have some other minister stand up that has nothing to do with disability at all.
Yeah,
Yeah,
completely out of touch. And
yeah.
yeah, I guess the question I have, Mike, is how hard would it be for the federal government to implement a, minister to do with persons with disabilities, like like Carla Quantrill, Kamala Kara. I never pronounced
Easy for you to say, Brent.
yeah, never pronounced the former minister's name.
Kamel Kara, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but have a minister in place for that portfolio. I mean, I guess it wouldn't be that difficult, would it? I mean, it's been now years since after Trump
No,
was out, and yeah,
it's a deliberate choice,
yeah,
right, Brent?
yeah,
Cabinet um, is reflective of a particular government's priorities.
hmm,
And you'll see even like the titles shift. And in recent years, there are more and more. It used to be that cabinet positions would reflect departments in the public service.
hmm,
So there's, Health Canada, and Health Canada's minister responsible is the Minister of Health. And so each department would have a minister. More and more, in Ontario, we have a Minister of Red Tape Reduction. Of
right,
course, there's no Department of Red Tape Reduction in the provincial government.
yeah,
It's the government signaling to Ontarians where they see priorities and
ah,
using
yes,
their rhetoric to communicate that. not totally sure what the Minister of Red Tape Reduction does, but I'll let that person speak for themselves about
Mhm.
their portfolio.
Yeah, that'd be
The
interesting.
the federal government, of course, does have some pressures because there was some criticism about the size of cabinet becoming unwieldy.
Hmm.
Um, and so they cut the size of cabinet. And in that cut, they chose to remove persons with disabilities from the ministerial portfolio. Um, and so uh, with, a cabinet shuffle tomorrow, they could change that. And not having done so and actually backsliding on their, the presence of people with lived experience at the cabinet table
Hmm.
and also the lack of a portfolio, I think just indicates that I'm not it's just a reality, right? It's pretty clear that if that's the case, you're indicating that that's not a priority for your
Yeah.
government. And it's deeply disappointing. And it means that we need to advocate that much harder. And well, for folks like myself, I'm running again whenever the next election comes along. And
Hmm.
part of my interest is to make sure that folks with disabilities in Kitchener Center are heard by this federal government. And I want to get back to doing this work that I can and will continue to do through, civil society and through my roles with the Green Party. But I want to make sure we get that voice back into Parliament and to work with others. Because there were plenty of others when I was an MP that we were able to bring alongside. The letter that went to Minister Qualtrough at the time to put pressure on the legislation even being brought forward,
Yes.
we had upwards of 70 MPs sign on. So I know there are many colleagues who have an interest,
Hmm.
but we also need MPs who are going to, champion the voices and experiences of folks with disabilities.
Absolutely.
And that's something I want to get back to doing in our parliament.
Absolutely. And just recently, I noticed that a couple more new departures that have been happening, and cabinet shuffle, and I think some people are now realizing that there's a lot of friction going on within the within Parliament. Within the governing party, I mean, maybe there'll be an election, sooner than what we think. I'm hoping that. I think maybe a brand new, election, maybe just to refresh things and get new faces,
Yeah.
and and recognize that the inequalities, how things are affecting people's lives across the country, like affordability, all the crises that are going on, like healthcare affordability, how housing. I mean, like it's huge. Um, and I guess with that Canada Disability Benefit that was promised, and people thought, well, yay, like finally, they're going to get something to top up their income to offset the cost of affordability. And I was very disappointed when the federal government got rid of part. Well, they didn't get rid of. They zeroed it down. I'll rephrase it. They zeroed down the climate action credit. They zeroed down that carbon credit down to zero. They didn't get rid of it, but they left on the industrial part, which still now it actually makes things just still even more expensive, because that industrial part, I mean, it's a trickle down effect into the grocers, all your shops and services. Um, but it was more of a carrot trick, really. It's like saying, look what we're doing. We're going to make things more affordable, but they haven't.
Mm.
That's the part I look at too. And I was talking to one of the grocers who runs a business close by here, and they even told me, they said our costs haven't come down, like they've actually gone up, because of that. Yeah.
Well, and who
Yeah.
is it that would receive more in the climate action rebate than they would pay in the consumer carbon tax?
Hmm.
It's low income people who netted out on the positive side of that.
Yes.
And so while, to your earlier point, Brent, I recognize that folks in my community and I think broadly held across the country, most people aren't looking for an election right now.
Hmm.
And stability is certainly helpful when we're dealing with the threats from the US in
Yeah.
particular. And I think it is concerning that the current governing party is just shifting further and further to the right, so
Mm.
much so that their own MPs are now joking that it seems like it's a progressive conservative budget.
Okay.
And we're seeing that with the resignation of Minister Guilbeault, of the demotion of some of the more progressive voices in the Liberal caucus right now. And if you look at the policy context, you look at this budget, you see money for housing is cut.
Yeah.
Disability benefit
Yep.
remains inadequate. We go through a long list that is reflective of this government's priorities, which, even compared to the previous Liberal government, is pretty clearly further to the right.
I noticed that too.
And so, in between elections, that means putting pressure and advocating to MPs. And we're seeing, Minister Guilbeault as an example to say, you know what, I want to be more honest. And he said this a few times in some of the more recent interviews, is, not being in cabinet means he can be more honest about a really, difficult decision that he didn't agree with. And to me, MPs take those stands because they have integrity, but also as a result of hearing from constituents. And now is as good a time as any to continue to remind this government their promise to the disability community and the reality. And again, the experiences we're hearing on the ground. I so appreciate folks who've been letting me know what it's been like these last 6 months. How long is it taking? How many denials are we seeing? We don't have those stats yet, right?
Yeah, and I know you probably want to wrap up the show pretty soon.
Yeah, maybe that's
But
what we can come back to for next time, though, Neil.
yeah,
Too,
but
is
I
as we
wanted
get some of
to
those stats.
I wanted to give one more comment. Somebody in chat gave a good comment. Let's see. It's um, it's Michael Chapman has made the comment. He's on CPPD, so Canada Pension Plan Disability, and he does not qualify for the Canada Disability Benefit either.
Wow.
So I mean, it just
Wow.
goes to show you, right? I just wanted to throw that
Yeah.
in there as another example of somebody that does qualify for the CPPD,
Mhm.
so but does not qualify for the Canada Disability Benefit. It's just crazy to me. Yeah.
A lot more barriers for sure.
Yeah.
Well, and there's the age one too that I brought
And the
forward in
age one.
committee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When a person turns 65, it's going to be cut off as well, and
Yeah.
disability doesn't end at 65. Why should the
Exactly.
benefit? Never got a good answer to that question either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we'll continue on basically on this, Mike. We'll have you back on in the new year, and we'll see where things are at that time with the Canada Disability Benefit, and see if there's any changes. Hopefully sooner than later for the Canada
Yeah.
Disability Benefit, because people are suffering now, and they can't keep waiting forever for the federal government to figure out how to get that out to people. I mean, it should be based on the individual. They should be getting out based on the individual, not household. Maybe they've got to put another zero on the end of that, Mike.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
Listen, Neil and Brent,
Yeah.
thanks for the invite to be back with you again.
Happy holidays to you,
And
Mike.
yeah, to those listening, happy holidays, Merry Christmas. Certainly, hope you can get time with loved ones and lean on those folks, because when we're let down by government, we need community mutual aid and support to step in. And I hope that for folks listening, and I hope you all have a wonderful holiday season.
All right.
Happy holidays, Mike,
Thanks.
and Merry
Thanks,
Christmas,
Mike.
and all the best. And we'll look forward to having you on the new year. And I echo what you just mentioned, Mike. Is people in the disability community on social media, reach out to loved ones, reach out to Mike said, mutual aid, any kind of help that you can get. If there's any donors, anybody out there to help each other, let's help our brothers and sisters, mothers, fathers. Let's help each other and allies. We all come together and help each other through these difficult times. But Merry Christmas to everybody and happy holidays. And Mike, thanks again for coming on, and all the best. And we'll look forward to having you on the new year. Take care.
Yeah, thanks.
And thanks everyone for tuning in to PWD Allies podcast today. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.